I'm actually going to record this session tonight. So hopefully it works. I've not successful in the past, just little technical difficulties here and there. But so we're going to go ahead and record this session. Our sponsors for the evening, I was going to say the pizza is sponsored by Sapient Tools. And we'll see how that lines up. They've actually been a great sponsor for us from day one. Like, they've really gotten pizza to us all the other meetings. And it's been nice. And then our other sponsor has actually been loanDepot for the facilities. Like, technically, this is an independent community group. I just so happen to work for loanDepot as well, and many of our members and presenters have been from loanDepot, so it's been great that they've been able to also provide a space for us to meet every month. So I guess with that, any questions before we begin? All right, I guess we'll give you nothing to have questions on. So with that, I'll start our presentation here. All right, so please help me keep an eye out for people, sneaking up behind me. I'd appreciate that. So, enterprise scale DSC, DevOps at loanDepot. So first off, like I said, I'm Kevin Marquette. I've been the founding member and organizer of this group kind of since the beginning. Dave Christian is not here yet, has also been a core part of the group. I'm an MVP now. I've been a PowerShell hero from the summit, and I've got several community modules and a blog that I'm kind of maintaining. So I guess when I say enterprise scale, the question is like, what is enterprise scale? I've been at some meetings presentations where they're like, oh, it's global, whatever. I found that a lab in England and a lab over in Boston, like, of 20 servers. Like, well, it's not quite, so what? Here we're talking about deployable components. We're a DevOps team first, so we kind of see our infrastructure through the need to deploy the components that are built by our dev teams. So we kind of see it through the components that we deploy. So 270 deployable components is what we manage in our system. And to kind of get a visual representation of that is every one of these boxes, there's 270 boxes here. Each could have and does have unique configuration needs and demands for the server setup and how we deploy these components. And so my components, sometimes they're websites that have web bindings and app pool configurations. Sometimes they're services. We have some standalone apps, modules, all that stuff. I kind of consider those a component that we can deploy. I think our largest component is deployed to the most servers. It's 120 different servers. That's the largest scale we have, one component figuring across multiple things. I looked on average. I think the average deployment of component touches like 14 servers. And then we also have about 20 different environments. Now, kind of get back to what that really means, but that's kind of, this component could have different unique configurations depending on the environment that it's going into. So there's just a feel for the scale of what we're talking about. Now, this presentation as a whole, I don't know, have you guys seen like Memento? Like it's a movie that does let's start from the end and tell the story backwards really well. And that's kind of what I plan to do with the rest of this talk is I think we do some really unique stuff and cool stuff here at loanDepot. But at the end, we have a well-functioning, infrastructure that's ran by DSC and our dev. So I'm basically going to start at the end of how the infrastructure looks and walk backwards to how do we get the MOFs and configurations there, to how do we organize and structure our data, to finally how we actually do our data. And my hope is that maybe that can give you guys a path to where maybe our data wouldn't apply to your situation, but maybe some of those steps back from the ideal organization would. So that's kind of my goal for our talk here. And then a quick overview. How many of you are familiar with DSC or at least know what it is? Okay. I know we've done our series on it. We've talked about it quite a bit. I was kind of using this here before the content of the slide deck, which I'll share out after this meeting. But yeah, it's managed platform. It's a framework, and it basically has three primary components to it. Right? We got the configurations themselves that tell the server what needs to be configured. We have our resources, which are the actual guide for how individual instructions should be performed. And then the local configuration manager is basically the server itself, the process that takes the configs and the resources and configures the system. So what we don't talk about very much, desired state config, is the supporting infrastructure, right? Like if I'm just configuring a box, the other tools and ways, other tools that can help us configure that system are often left out. I think one of the core ones that gets missed a lot is like having a good way for package distribution. Like we use a NuGet server or like chocolate package suite that lets us package stuff and deploy it out to the servers versus say off of a file share. And let me jump to this diagram here because I think it's a little bit better visual on that. So let's talk about the magic here going in a bit. But basically we start with adding the mop files to the pull server, the LCM pulls them down, figures out what resources it needs to load. When the resources run, we have one resource that does our chocolate package installs. So if we need to get like a Notepad++ on a box or some internal tools or something, other content, quite often we actually lean on packages in NuGet, like chocolate packages for these, versus the file share. And one of the real reasons I love that approach is because this also supports anything other than DMZ a lot easier. If you have a box that has no authentication, it's not part of the domain, that has no firewall access to your share, it's a lot more difficult to get all of those ducks in a row versus opening your ports to a package server that says over HTTPS and pull down these files and just load them. You kind of get to detach from those AD authentication requirements if that's something your environment covers. On the same note, occasionally we'll have some files that might change a lot or are really tiny that aren't worth putting into a package. We might just drop on another IIS website that can be easily queried and pulled down as needed. All right, so let's talk about the scope of DSC. Right, so anytime somebody's talking about sort of using DSC to do stuff, you should always get a good picture of the scope of what they actually are configuring and what they aren't configuring. Because sometimes those lines kind of get blurred depending on who you're talking to. So in our situation, we configure like everything that we deploy, right? All of those websites, services, like I already mentioned. But then any of the managed or any of the required software and settings, like ideally, we want a brand new gold image off the ISO, minimally touched. I don't mind if it has Windows updates on it. I don't mind if we have PowerShell updated. In fact, I kind of need that for my pipeline. But once we get that base state, the configuration there forward, DSC owns the rest of the process. So all the features and roles and anything else all loaded, we don't expect or anticipate the image to have that. I mean, if it does, we'll kind of double check on that. But this would allow like future proofing it. Going forward, you need to create a new image really quick for some reason, or you're changing OSs, like 20 whatever. Ideally, your configs can align quite nicely to not have to do a lot of image prep work for that. Now, I won't say we don't have other stuff in our image, because we absolutely do. But the ideal goal is DSC does as much as possible. What is not managed with DSC? Like network settings, right? Like if I'm spinning up a new VM or system, the ensuring what IP address it has, gateway settings, DNS, we've got other tools that do that, like DSC does that beautifully, right? We have other PowerShell scripts to make sure we're on the network cleanly. We also, via our scripts and tooling, join the system to domain. So that's another piece that we leave out of DSC, because DSC would be perfectly happy doing domain joins. But Our pipeline just does a little bit more management, like putting the right OUs, permissions, and just other management of that computer, that it just makes sense for our pipeline to set the account, join it, and then hand it over for our DSC to progress. I kind of mentioned, Windows updates are kind of like out of band. We kind of let SCCM and other automation take care of updates, so our DSC configs themselves don't define the updates to install or manage them. That way, we're only changing our configurations when we want to change something, and I think it's just a cleaner cycle that way. If you bring Windows updates into your DSC configs, it generates a lot of churn, a lot of manipulation on them quite quickly. And I kind of mentioned like the website content, because to us that's a deployable thing. So when a dev has a release, the contents of the site itself comes through another pipeline or build release. So we'll have a production ready server minus any content that should come from source control based off the other deployment schedules. So there's where the lines are between what we do and don't manage. So I guess any questions so far on kind of that phase of where our scope is as we kind of move forward? Cool. So then we go down the path of configuration as code. We try really hard to do as much of our configuration in one central spot in source and let that drive everything else we do. Like, we really want our source control to be the source control. If we are spinning up a new server, it goes into our data first. We get committed, and then our tooling spins it up and does all the other stuff from that point of view, from that place. And as it literally does drive all of the automation in our tool. Everything from DNS records to patching to the F5 configuration. And I think this kind of shows it here as well. Like in our source, we have what we call our metadata. It's like a flat database on disk. In source, we call it Turian. And in source, we have all of our DSC resources, all of our PowerShell modules, our toolkit scripts, everything else. So we definitely want to in-source first before we use it for anything else.
When you say your modules, you have the ones you develop or the ones even in the gallery?
Ooh, I will say the ones we develop.
Okay.
We do have a pipeline that pulls the external ones and places them internally into an internal feed so that we can determine when we take versions of stuff, I guess. But yeah, anything that we develop and write code for, we drive through source control.
And Turian is your homegrown?
That's our homegrown. This is loanDepot magic that holds all of the configuration about what we're going to kind of march forward with here. So I'm going to show you some of it at the very, very end, but ideally this could be, in one scenario it could be a CSV of information for servers and what goes on them, like roles. It could be JSON documents, database. Like there's many options for what your source of truth configuration could be. And I'll give some more examples as we step into it. So the way we drive everything is we start in source, and then when we check it in, we publish our data to an Elasticsearch. We actually outgrew disk-based access, I guess. Like we used to go directly to source and say, give me this data, process it. And that meant it was doing a lot of client-side processing as the files. We got more and more things to configure. It was slower to search for everything. So the volume of our stuff grew so much that we needed something to just say, give me this file, give me this thing I want to query and search for. In our environments, Elasticsearch was the ideal candidate. If potentially if you wanted to have a database in that box, you could think of it as a database, as a source of data, a source of where your source gets published to.
Well, that makes sense because isn't Elasticsearch defaults format JSON?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's actually why we chose it, because our metadata is actually in JSON files. So it's a JSON schema set of data. So once we get into Elastic, we use it for everything else. So we publish our configurations, our DSC configurations from Elastic. We actually deploy our DSC resources directly to the pull server when we make changes or updates. I could have the pull server pull from NuGet, but sometimes I want that quicker turnaround of I make changes, I want to use them, and we just tighten it up by deploying directly to our pull server. Then I also, we have part of our DSC configuration is managing our logging info. We use metric feed, file feed, and we have unique configurations per server. So our data, our metadata, we use our metadata to generate what the unique logging configuration is for the servers quite frequently, and we dump them on a website. The DSC will then pull those small files down and apply them to the local system. But like I said, so our build and release pipeline, like I was talking about earlier, was if we know how to configure a website because that's what DSC tells us. But our component information, it knows it's a website. It should know also how to deploy a website, right? So now we have this one spot that tells us both how to configure and how to deploy. That way we're not having different tools knowing configuration and another tool knowing deployment. So if, in our scenario, if we were to bring in like a, say a Puppet or a Chef, we would still have our data orchestrate how Puppet or Chef does its configurations because it has all the information you need for it. And so this is where we started, right? Our pull server, DSC, and for the build and release pipeline, and then we just kept going. Like, if I'm a website, I probably have DNS names. So our configuration, every component that's deployed to a web server actually gets a unique DNS name just for him, and it's automated and managed through our source data. Then as we kind of grew up a little bit, we needed to use some load balancers and like F5 configurations. Well, if I'm a component deployed on a web server, I know I need to have load balancer configurations. So our LTM and GTM configuration also gets generated from our metadata and applied to those systems. You get different, tooling chains. And even our firewall rules. This is one of those cases where we hand off a request to another team. So our data generates the data for the request. We open the ticket, and once they deem it's secure enough or do their review, they can then execute that script directly against, like, say, when we're doing NSX configurations for our systems. They could automatically deploy and run NSX. Now, I'm talking about specific technologies in here, like F5 and NSX, but we architected this in a way that if we need to add new stuff, we want to talk like a Cisco router directly, right? I have one thing talking to another thing. We could build those tools and those connections. So the key takeaway is, if I've got one source of data that tells me everything about this component, why can't it tell everything else how the component should be configured? And then here's I suppose, the API stack. I don't know if you've seen diagrams like this, but the idea is we have a set of functions and tools, our set functions, right? If we want to make changes to our data, we tend to call those set functions to create a new component, create a new server. It'll update our local source. We chuck it in. We do our build and our publish to Elastic. And then we actually use our get functions to query that information. And this builds us this nice, this separation in a way that we could change out the central pieces of this if we ever wanted to. And so if later we decided that, I hear that SQL does JSON now, and I want to use that instead, I can rip out the section in the middle where I'm publishing to Elastic. I can publish to SQL instead. I'll take my middle layer, my gets, to talk to SQL. And now all my tools, my DSCs and my F5 and my other stuff, don't have to change. And you just pull from those same get functions they've always been calling. In fact, we've already done this once. Like, the effort Elasticsearch in this stack is actually new as of January. Previously, we were talking more directly source files, and we worked the entire middle thing over a weekend, and coming on by Monday, Tuesday, most of the organization wasn't even aware we made the change. So having that beautiful separation lets us change a piece out really easily. No, I don't say really easily, but so much easier than everything was so tightly integrated. Okay. Whew, that's a lot. So any questions so far about, like having code as your source that drives your automation tools? You kind of see some of the value in that now, like how you could leverage some of that. So I want to show you something maybe you could think about as tooling for your infrastructure without even knowing, what the back end configurations look like. Okay. So then, yes?
So you said you need a new college server. How do you, is the deployment of that actual server still kind of manual, or?
So it kind of is. So right now for servers specifically, we don't add those that frequently, but we'll do our set with a new server, and we check it in, and then if we do a get server, we have all the information on it. The get server, because of our tooling, actually has the VM configuration, like the CPUs, the memory, and the disks that it would need. And then we basically pipe that to a new LDVM to actually spin up and actually configure and set up the server. It definitely opens it up to something that could be done via pipeline. Like, it wouldn't take much more to say, every time we publish, see if I have a new server that's not live yet, and go set it up. The thing you gotta make sure you're taking into account, like how you decondition servers too. Like, you don't want to delete a server and all of a sudden realize it's gone and then stand it up. But that's definitely a possibility. We decided to make that a manual decision. So, hey, I'm ready to watch and see the server come up for this group of servers. But yeah, it definitely could be more streamlined.
Kevin,
Oh, hey! Thank you. Come on in.
Food is also outside.
Oh, yay! Well, right now is a good segue point. So I'm actually start talking about the data itself in this next section here. So why don't we just grab some pizza a little bit? Grab a pizza here. Well, cool. Well, I suppose we've got we'll grab one last piece of pizza here. I'll probably kick off onto the next section here. So I suppose we've covered the high-level pieces from our infrastructure back to the pipeline, back to code in general as the source of truth. Now we're going to shift into and talk about our source of truth, our metadata. So with that, the basic structure of our setup is we've got, I talked about servers, I guess just a computer or a node. And I've mentioned components a little bit, right? It's a deployable item, website, service, whatever. Two other groupings we have is we take multiple components that are built and configured and kind of deployed at the same time and part of the same TFS project. We generally call those one product. It's just a logical grouping of components. And then a different logical grouping is our roles, which actually maps a component to the server that it's going to be living on. So we might have one product that has two components. One goes out to the DMZ and one goes internal. And we use the role to map them to those different sets of servers. I'm going to show you kind of how that breaks out. So let's say our product has an internal API and a public API. It's part of maybe a multi-tier app that might have a database as well and a web page that talks to these things. But I'll keep my example kind of narrow to these two. So our product itself, we might create two roles, an internal role for this and a DMZ role. And then we'll assign them to each other. And then the idea of an environment comes into play where we have a set of production internal servers that are assigned to the internal role and the external DMZ servers that are part of the DMZ role. And we'll see an environment as like that logical grouping of stuff that should talk to each other, be configured together. And we try to keep boundaries so that production can't talk to another environment. But if we want to, we can send up another, let's say, QA, and configure and manage those relationships that way. Next thing about the roles is, not the nice not, but we actually assign components from different products to that role. And this is kind of how the pieces kind of lay together. So from our product contains the components, are mapped to roles, and those roles map to servers. And so one of the features of the role is when we have a configuration, a DSC configuration for this component, and a DSC configuration for the other component, we actually kind of build those together into one larger configuration that gets applied to the server. So the ABC knows his specific DSC needs, and the XYZ knows his specific DSC configuration needs. When we're setting up to deploy to the servers, we kind of coalesce them together and produce one configuration, one mock, based off all of the components that are on that role. Sometimes we'll have a couple roles per, or a couple components per role. You might see in our lower environments, we might stack that a little bit heavier. We might have like several components on a role just to select resources where it's 1 to 1 or 2 servers. But then when we go to production, we might have a new role for just production that says this guy only has a couple services for these 10, 20 servers. So now that we've kind of seen at this high level our various pieces, I'm going to start cracking open some of our metadata, and we're going to look at what this actually looks like in our setup. So let's go. And let me just make sure I'm still connected here. That looks good. And that looks good. Okay, so I'm going to start by kind of showing you how our tools interact with our data. So in this case, in fact, let me swap our colors real quick. There we go. Oh, that might be too big. All right. Hopefully that's easier to read. I don't know if it is or not, but we'll roll with it. So here's a case where I'm going to create a new product. So I have a clean set of data now. Like I said, I got 270 components in my production setup. This guy here, I have minimal seeding data just for this demo. But we're going to create new components to kind of walk through and see what's going on here. So in this case, I'm going to create a new product just as a container for some new components we're going to create. We tend to, when we create a product, we'll add other data like what the Jira project key will be. So when we're doing ticketing things, we can find that connection. We also in here also add like TFS, like what's its identifier in TFS or build place. So whatever data that's tied to the product, we try to bake into the process here. So this is probably like a minimum setup. And if we run this, and we'll see the changes over here on the left. I've actually created a product. I don't know if you guys have used VS Code much, but I really love the Git interaction. So any changes I make, we'll see the new files show up here on the left. And this guy is, this is what the product looks like. So our metadata is JSON files. It gives us the flexibility to really customize to our needs, what we're going for. And we also back it with a schema. It's a fancy way to say that we've got rules for it that will not only validate everything we use in here, but also give us some really mad like autocomplete abilities. So we decide that I'm going to put a description on this guy. Demo product. the JSON schema that we have helps me know which properties to use. And they'll become more valuable here as we go on and add a couple components. So that's the product, our larger container. And I'm going to create my multi-tier app here. We'll create a website. And this guy here, we'll name this guy ABC Web. I'm using some variables so I can kind of reuse this name later on easier. This guy is going to be an Angular app. So I have some templating built in, like, every time we create a new Angular website, it's so common when we set these things. Let's kind of seed it. Let's give us some information about the very basics of this component. As I go on to do a public API, this pattern is so common. I've had a template for public APIs. You'll kind of see that pattern repeat as I add the next couple components.
And where are the templates from?
This is, I'll say this is magic inside this module.
Okay.
So my new LD component is part of my LDX set module that we use for interacting with the module, or with the journey. I can show you how I'm kind of mapping that in if we kind of want to get that towards the end. But it's basically comes down to is I've got a couple files with that name. And when I run that, I copy the files in and make some small changes to it. So it truly is kind of I'm going to be talking about two different types of templates. This is one type where I'm going to say I'm going to seed this component with some basic information. So we're going to create the first component, and we'll see him create a couple files here on the side. Because I told it which product it's in, if I go back and look at that product, we will see that it's already added this component. So as we add, so they know they're related, let's go ahead and update the product. Like, let's let our tooling do the heavy lifting of figuring out what needs to happen. So I'm going to go ahead and create a public API, a core API, and I'm using these short terms for my public API would be one that sits in the DMZ that might proxy into an API internal. And then if I'm doing a database, I've got a component for that as well. SSDT is what SSDT with DAC packs is what we use for databases. So I kind of have templates in place for that. So I jump back to our product. I can see, yeah, it was smart enough to know to add these things in this one property on this JSON file. But it's more fun when we actually look at one of these components, like this one here. Now, we have three really nice features to our configurations. The first one is that we support templates. So we can do some really complex stuff, but I can hide a lot of that complexity that's very common in another file and pull it in. So, since we're talking about DSC, I'm going to show you how we configure DSC inside this JSON file. And we got a section called validators, and I got DSC. So right away you can kind of see how my autocomplete and my schema just kind of like tells me which way to go. So let's say on my website that I need to set the default page to load. I don't like what our default is in our template, and I want to overwrite it or just set it to something that's not even defined. So I know that's in the X website resource because I've worked with websites enough. So if we do our autocomplete, all of our DSC resources pop up for us. We do X website, and then since this guy is an array, because I can define multiple websites, let's do the name. I'll come back to what this token means in a second. My desired state, default page. I'll call this guy next.htm as a string. So the magic of what just happened here is I think I was able to autocomplete right down to this very specific setting, kind of almost easier than I would in the IC for normal DSC configuration. Like if you've spent some time building DSC configs, this schema batch design made that super quick and easy to find. So the token here, this percent component percent, is actually a shortcut for the component name. So we have this idea of tokens. The component name is a token, the product name is a token, the environment is a token, and the role. Like if I want something in this configuration file that is like very generic, I can use these tokens to reference a generic thing. So I do know out of convention that we give our websites the name of percent component percent to pull in the component name, and I can reference that at any time. But let's keep going here. So let's see if I want to do some app pool settings. I know the app pool is X app pool. The name is 1%. Then desired state. All the properties, I've already got my autocomplete for everything I ever want to configure. So we want to say, let's make this guy enable 32-bit on 64-bit, whatever the reason is, right? I can specify it here. And I actually have access to all of desired state configuration. So as I want to move on to something else, chocolate packages, right? If I say the .NET full package, if I decide this guy needs a specific version, I can say that the version is either the latest we have in our NuGet feed, or we'll say this guy is 4.7.2, and he'll make sure that this guy gets that version. So you can kind of see how we can tell this component, here's what's unique about you, about your configuration. And some of the magic I was hiding before is that I've got this template up here that pulls in all of my other website-based configurations. I'm standing up there. My name's on the flyer. Okay, cool, thank you. Okay, so okay, templates. So if I want to go take a peek at what my website template is by default, I can probably go jump into my actual source here and look at my templates for my app config, not app config, sorry, components, website. And I know if I get in here, there's other stuff for a build and release. But as I look through this list, I see I've got this rewrite chocolatey package. We've got a tool that's cleaning up log folders. I'm making sure folders exist. Like I have quite a bit for my default website configuration. And I get all this for free by using the template. But because of our JSON schema, any single property in here I don't like, I have the ability to specify and overwrite it, or add in new properties that just aren't defined. So that's kind of why we get excited about what our data can do, is what do we imagine it could do for the configuration set. And here's where, got my app pool. So let's jump back to my demo here. I could spend more time looking at a component and show you other stuff that we're configuring in there. But I'm kind of forge ahead here and pull in some more pieces, and I'll talk about some other nice features that we have. So I've got my component. We took a peek at that config. Let's see, what roles do I have right now? I kind of ask my data, what roles do I have? And it says I have an internal API. Let's go ahead and create an external one. And I get a little warm. It's like my house this last couple of weeks. Woo. All right. Did I run that? I did. There's an external role. So by default, I created this empty role. I had specified, I was really quick on that one, this guy sits in the DMZ, so he pulls in the DMZ template. Whatever that needs for the DMZ gets pulled in there. No components yet, but since the role kind of like talks about how the servers should be configured, we actually put like our VM settings right here. So if I do VM settings, and I want the CPU for this role to actually be something much larger than our default, or the or the memory to be, I don't know, smaller for some reason, I got the ability here to override our default system setup based on the role that's assigned to. And the same even goes for the disks. So if I need to add a disk to the D drive that is, I don't know, size say 300 gig for this group of servers, I can kind of get that defined in here. So let's drop this for now, because I don't need that. And then, okay, so then more tooling to add stuff to roles. Like I can go in and manage those JSON files directly. And anytime I find myself touching them for something, I try to go back and write a command to do that for me. So if I'm adding stuff to roles quite often, I got a function for that. Add LD component to role member, does a mapping for me. If I jump into the role now, I can see that, hey, I just assigned the API in the web to this component from running this first command here. And then, creating servers. I mean, I need to get a whole bunch of servers stood up. So let's say I got 2 data centers, my Austin and LA data center, and I create this quick environment list that says I want to set up like a dev, QA, stage, and prod with this many servers per data center. So let me preload this information, and we'll see how this runs for me over Wi-Fi. I think this should still just work. So I'm looping on data centers, looping on environments. I'm creating a new splat that has the environment name, the number of servers, a name pattern, and the role it's assigned it to. And is role defined? I should probably check that real quick. He is. We'll do all this in the DMZ. So now when we run this, it'll take a second, because this is actually checking to see, we do like pin into the data what IP address the server has. That's just so valuable for all of our tooling downstream, like our load balancing and things of that nature. We walk the scopes and we ping and check and verify the address is available. So we audit what we have, we check the live addresses, and we see on the side there some server just kind of popping into my change set. And the server is actually kind of simple, right? It's give it a name, an environment, a role, and some other unique stuff about it. So my demo finishes, which it has. I want to do a full build and publish. I got some little housekeeping I need to do, such as I need to create some service accounts for my internal APIs. That's just one of the patterns that core has for talking to the database. So let's create some accounts with some unique passwords. And then I want to assign everything a unique port. Because these things might be sharing servers, I need to have a different port for each one of them. So some more housekeeping magic, where we say, let's set a property to some available port from our data. So it's actually going to set one, and the next one, it'll actually know that it's been used, and it's in the list. Oh, and then firewall rules. Why not? Let's see. Our website talks to the public API, and the public API talks to the core API. Let's add some firewall rules. So before I do a full build, I guess I should probably show you I talked about tokens, but I kind of overlooked one detail, and that is, or I kind of skipped over one detail, which I can come back to now that I got data in there. is my actually, where did he go? My data bag. So I talked about tokens, right? I've got 4 tokens by defaults: my component name, my product name, my role name, and location. I suppose that's 5. But I also have this property called data bag. I don't know if I touched on it or not, but I got all of these properties that if I define them in my data bag, I can reuse them anywhere else. And what I mean by that is the port of the website, I need it on the website binding, I need it on the VIP. I'm gonna use this thing multiple times. I may as well define it in one place and use that tokenization somewhere else. The public IP is another common one where we may want to say this guy is just talking to himself. Maybe not. Okay, so as long as I didn't break anything in this config, in fact, I'm gonna drop that off because I think he's an easy one to screw up. I'll just not save it at all. Okay, let me get a build rolling here, and we'll publish this thing and see if we can access some of this data. Okay, so I've set some data, kind of looked at what we're configuring, and this is definitely a crash course. Like, I'm not expecting you guys to go home and implement all of this stuff. Like, this is, a good deal of development effort went into all the magic behind the scenes, right? But I'm trying to show you one viable approach that we took to solving the problem. All right, so I've built this and I've published this to an Elastic server. And if I do, so I got some commands here. If I do like get LD server, environment dev, I can see, I almost love this. I use get LD server all the time. If I want to know exactly what servers I have and where they are, just ask in PowerShell, just give me my servers for this environment or this data center. Having this at my fingertips and being able to do other stuff really quickly is just been so valuable. Creating case sessions or testing their health or whatever else. Having a list of servers that you just query whenever you want really quickly, that's the source, the definitive source, is just super handy in anything that you do. So yeah, here's all the servers. I haven't deployed any of these, so these are servers to be. I'll put it that way. Once I run my new server command, it would stand these up, but that runs a little bit long. I'm going to cut that from the scope of what we show off here. All right, now the build did a lot of fancy stuff behind the scenes. Right, it grabbed all those templates, merged them together, did all my tokenizations, and it overrode any values it needed. And if I take a peek at the resulting output, I'm going to get a component, the core API in this example, for the dev environment, because I have environment-specific configurations. And we take a peek at what this guy looks like. You're going to see a massive amount of templates. Like, we have templates that import templates that take care of a lot of stuff for us, like the way SCCM is set up, the way the cert that's loaded. This guy here gets the internal wildcard cert. Like, this tells me a lot just by seeing which templates are loaded. But ultimately, those result in many common databag properties that could be used by anything else. By pulling that wildcard cert, I actually get access to the thumbprint for that cert that I could use somewhere. Like having the thumbprint on load balancer or wherever else is just super convenient. So let me close that. Skipping over the deploy, which is our deploy tooling leverages that. And skip over networking. And then here we're back to our DSC config. This is where it consolidated, detokenized all of our pieces. So I said I added a service account. Like that one line, I see past it really fast that, hey, I need a service account for this service. Well, just by adding into the right spot, I made sure that the IIS users has him as a member. Like we've got the mapping to pull those pieces in for us. So now my DSC config knows which account to load. The app pool itself says he's a specific user using using a specific credential, and all of the settings are blown out here. Like this is the post-compile result that goes more directly into a DSC config. Anyway, so this guy goes on for miles. He's just a gigantic document. But everything about that component, the imports to have, are listed right there. We have other fun settings, like I skipped over the networking, but our logging. I dive into networking just a peek. Firewall rules, and even our DNS names. Since I didn't actually define an IP address, I kind of skipped over that. This guy wouldn't actually build, but I get all the patterns I need for generating the DNS names that I want this for. So, that is a crash course in the metadata for what drives our automation. So with that, if I decompress a little bit, what questions do we have and things we want to take a closer look at? Okay. It's a lot to take in. It takes a new guy a few weeks to truly get comfortable with all of this stuff and really appreciate and be able to add and do things at the speed and pace that I'm doing here. Right? Like I probably know this the best because I spent a great deal of time of re-architecting major chunks of this. And like I said, we just have, in one way, I could just say it's a bunch of JSON files, but and the goal wasn't to not have to configure something. We need to configure everything. But we also need to make it really easy for us to configure everything. And the way we design this is we can pick any aspect or feature we want, make a configuration, and it flows down the pipe down the stream. So while some things may feel very generic when I just do a very common component like website, because we do so many of those, this value really shines when we start doing those snowflake ones, those special cases, those one-offs that deviate quite a bit from these very default common templates. Because every system needs to account for it, and this is how we account for that.
So I've got a question.
Yes, what did I miss?
So what if you need something super specific, like something different? Like let's say your dev environment needs like a totally different DNS name. What do you do?
Well, let's grab that one. So you probably saw one of the properties here I jumped over is the DNS host name. Like we actually tokenize this as well. So there's a nice tangent before I get to that one is we have this beautiful tokenization that if you know the name of your component and you know what environment it is in, you probably know the DNS address it's at and how to access it. So this cookie-cutter process allows us to deploy to lots of environments, and devs can say, you know what, I know it's dev, I know it's QA, I know it's UAT or whatever, just by knowing the name of the component and the environment it's in. And automating the DNS creation and having a name for every component really makes that beautifully easy to work with. So, more to your point though, let's say this guy here, I'll use DNS zone, because, or yeah, I'll do host name, DNS host name. So, what we do is, let's say, set LD, what am I autocomplete? Set LD. Boy, without my autocomplete, I'm lost. Update LD. All right, I think I have an example right here. So because I just know that it's in the data bag, this is a very common place to change these type of things. We're going to see in the core API the DNS name, and we're going to call this guy names on the fly. Wild West. Okay, but I only want this in the environment environment dev. Okay? Oh. I know what it is. I know what it is. This guy here is still running. So that was blocking my autocomplete. Oh. You know what? This guy isn't published yet. Oh, thank you. Got us to the right property, guys. Okay, so dash DNS host name. I'm still missing some autocomplete on that guy, but okay. So one of the other magic features of our process is we can actually say per environment or role or data center, here are some extra settings just for you. And that's kind of what he's alluded to here is, I want this DNS name to be special only in dev because we're doing some crazy dev testing. But I do not want to affect QA stage of production, especially not production, right? So if we take a peek at the files that were created, we're getting a lot of them now. I create this dev file that actually probably makes more sense if we look at him here first. So I have, over on the side, a folder for every component that has his base file. I'll call him the base file. The common settings that every environment should have. But if I need to say just dev has something special, I can drop in a dev file, and it'll actually make that stuff overwrite whatever's in the base file. So while we talked about adding a DNS host name that's special to this guy, this also comes back to we have full access to all of our same settings we were doing before. And what's nice about this is if I need to do something strange, like I need to turn SSL off on the website just for dev, I can go in here and just say, let's go back to port 80. Let's turn off SSL. And I can publish that. I can publish everything, and since dev's the only one to change, I'm only taking SSL off there. And then I'm ready to go to QA. I can promote it. And once we're saying, okay, this is solid, let's make this change to the base file. And I can delete those, but it's one way to promote changes up an environment. One of our templates is actually called all servers. So everything somehow eventually imports the all servers template. And we actually have environment-specific files to say when we actually rolled out .NET, we went to the dev environments and added the .NET update from 4.7.1 to 4.7.2 in there. Let it bake for a week, and then we updated QA, and then once we this is solid for our environment, we were able to say, all right, everywhere, let's just update that to the 4.7.2, and then next time anybody got configs, they got that changed. So giving us an environment-specific override, and he's basically, in a weird way, actually not in a weird way, but his template is basically the base file. So he actually tells me exactly who he's going to import to make this happen. Cool. Anything else that I missed to be worth mentioning?
So another question.
Sure.
You have to make a resource change after the fact. Let's say that you bump up the RAM or something. Would you do that in your configuration files?
So, actually, to be honest on that one, what we do is we build up the configuration file. That way, net new going forward, that would be resolved. And we'd probably pull together like a remediation script to go apply that. Since we don't do that change very often, we're pretty much whatever template is set, that's what we have to do. So it's like automate the stuff you're doing the most, and it's rare that we're tweaking those changes, or they're more on demand. Let's tweak these because we got a certain issue, and that's good. Then we kind of go back and address more of a bulk change.
Given how easy it is for us to spin up new servers because of this metadata, we're a lot more likely to just destroy those servers and create more ones.
Yeah, especially when we get away to like devs or wherever. We're like, yeah, the schedule time, we'll delete half the servers, spin them up, delete the other half, spin them up, and this process enables a workflow like that.
Actually, I think you answered my question, because the thing with looking at all the things that you had, like the code and the templates and everything, if you're looking for core, even worse, because I think with like State Core API, once you created that JSON file, the State Core API JSON,
Yeah.
you don't change it, because if those settings are used by something else, higher up, I guess from other files, then
Yeah. Here, let me try something else here.
okay.
So I've got that dev setting, and what's that command called? Expand. Expand LD component files.
They're very excited to see it.
Core API. Because the idea is, right, I don't want to change the base file because I don't know what I'm going to break, right?
Right.
So I think I can run this here. Fingers crossed. Okay. So what just happened is I now just exploded that file into all the possible settings. And now I can go make tweaks to even individually or my base file. I can fix something in the base file. Like we decided, you know what, we actually want the DNS host name to be Wild Wild West in the data bank here. I'm going to make it per environment. If I can spell environment. Environment. And let me just change, let's say this guy was already set that way, right? So because obviously QA can't have the same name. I need something different, right? So I'm going to soak the pattern of pull these out. So, and we'll see if I actually bounce over to one of these. Actually, he didn't blow up very far, did he?
It's because of your data center context.
Ooh, yep. I was out of context for what we're doing. So let's put him in here. Actually, blow that one out. Okay. But I want to make this guy dev. Because I'm going to call another function here in a second that's going to shrink those away. And then -dev. And so I should delete this file?
So there's actually a bug in the.
So yes, delete it?
Yeah, it's going to ignore this file later.
Eh.
So you can just delete it.
I'll delete it. Okay. So now everything's saved. Apply LD component templates to the components core API. Fingers crossed. All right. It went through, and it should have shrank these down to just stuff that was different. So we made the change that my DNS hostname is now this Wild West -environment. I made that my base file. So I exploded everything out. I made a change in the very base file, and I said, all right, let's shrink everything back down. And what got left is the stuff that was different. So what those values used to be in prod was %component - %environment. So I actually left these values in these files because now they don't match the base. And that allows us to make exactly that type of change. And then this guy, it actually pulled the settings out. I think he's probably supposed to delete these files, but then that's probably the bug he was talking about because it no longer needs that file there. But this is a way we can, if we need to make that change, we can say, let's expand everything, make our changes, shrink it back down, and now we shift where the deviations are. Yeah, so that's the crazy fun stuff that is interesting in code. So that's kind of why I didn't start with this, right? Because this is, I'll say this is kind of insane, but it's really awesome.
To say the opposite.
So I don't want to say, go home and build this, and that's why I want to start at the end. Like, start your infrastructure, build it out so you can do scale, your NuGet feeds, your websites, so you actually have everything you need for DSC, and then build your pipeline so you make the configs, the auto gets pushed out to your full server, and then think of some way to manage your configurations, something centrally, hopefully in source, because that's kind of the pattern going forward. And if you can do that, automate everything else based off those common sets of data, because except I know how to configure a website, I know how to deploy a website, and I know how to put it behind a load balancer, and I know how to create the DNS for it, right? Like, it's so common, these things. We decided to step back from all the tools and have data that drives all the tools, instead of having all of our data in all the different tools. So that's really what I want you to take away with, and this year's one sample implementation that actually achieves that goal. All right. All right, well, thank you. I suppose if you want to see any smaller details, come up and grab me. But I think this is kind of really what I prepared for today. So I really appreciate everybody coming out. Our group is growing quite nicely, and I like seeing all the repeat faces and new faces here. So hopefully we can kind of keep going with this. So thank you, everybody.
Keep your eyes out on GitHub. We are looking to open source a lot of this. No concrete promises, but
That's right. We do have an effort at loanDepot. It's actually, we've kind of the green light for a while, just finding the right cycles to get our modules out there. We have, what, about 15 or so modules, maybe 20? Who knows? We don't even know anymore. We got so many modules now. We have no idea how many we have. We've got lots of DSC resources, like that directory one, that clean folder, like that's an internal one. So we got an effort to start getting stuff out on GitHub, and we do have a couple small pieces sitting out there now, but we should probably start seeing more. Like I said, next month we're doing chat ops, like the guy behind the PS Slackbot will be doing a remote presentation, and we're using it a little bit here at loanDepot as well. That's kind of why there's a good tie-in in that, but it's kind of just kind of deal with some projects that we're working on. And like I said, I appreciate any feedback, good or bad, and suggestions. So thank you guys. All right, lots of crash course from DSC.
I didn't even get to see a JSON.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I was wondering if that was going to come up with every graph. I was like, wait. You got pretty close.
Yeah.
How do we go from JSON to models? About that?
Yeah, okay, let's go over that. PowerShell script. PowerShell.
It's actually not that interesting.
Yeah.
What script?
It's just a giant string.
Something
So did you read all the meetups? You know how meetup.com?
Yeah, I brought it back.
Okay.
See you next month.
Yeah, see you next month.
All right, have a good day.
Oh yeah, I suppose I should stop recording now. All right. Thank you, everybody.